Welcome again to American Christian or Christian American. If it's your first time, welcome. If you're just new to the channel, be sure to check out my earlier videos because they're going to help you to understand things, especially the first one and a few others. Yeah, I'm getting a little more polished than I was in the beginning, but they'll still help you with some basis information that I continue to reference. Also, if you like these videos, please subscribe. It's not like join. Join usually indicates a fee. Subscribing has no fee to it. It doesn't, all it does is help the videos come easier to you and helps promote the channel and make the channel grow. And then if you can also to hit that like button if you like the video. It helps the algorithm to spread the videos out to more people. So today we're going to be talking about some couple different things. And first of all, talking about racism being every white person is born a racist. Now, I don't mean that you're racist when you come out of the womb, but you're born into a society that is preparing you and molding you to be a racist. I'm going to show one particular video first to Jane Elliott, and we'll discuss it, and then we're going to get on to another video. So we've got about 2 videos today that we're going to talk about, and it's got some important features. Now, if you're white, don't let this irritate you and anger you. I'm white, or I don't like to use the term white because it is part of a social construct in order to promote racism. Because if we're white, then there's an opposing black, which those are terms that have been used just to simply separate people. I prefer to refer to myself as Caucasian. In reality, I am just a shade of brown, a very, very light shade of brown. And some are a medium shade of brown, and some are a very dark shade of brown. But we're all part of the same human family. We all come from the same place. We all come from Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve were medium brown people. And if you haven't heard what I talked about that, go back to the first video where I present evidence to the fact. So let's look at this first video, and then we'll go on from there.
You say that all whites are racist. Can you expound on that, please?
Any white person who was born, raised, and schooled in the United States of America, if you aren't a racist, you're a miracle. Either that or you decided to educate yourself. Because education in this country is about white is right, brown's all right, black's got to stand back. Yellow's mellow, but whites, we educate in a way that says that white males have done all the adventures, have made all the adventures, have done all the discovering, have made all, and everything that is good and has been accomplished according to social studies, which is actually anti-social studies, by white males. It's a lie. But we do that in order to maintain the myth of white superiority. The myth of race has to be maintained at all costs in this country. Because if white people have to give up the color of their skin as being something that makes them perfect, what do they have left? If we start teaching the truth about history, if we start teaching about Nile Valley contributions to civilization, it will totally change the way we conduct ourselves in the classroom. It will have to. Columbus didn't discover America. You can't discover a place where people are already living. But we celebrate that every October. It's a lie. We need to get over, we need to stop telling the myths and start telling the truth.
So when you tell people that they're racist, and it must have some kind of effect because most people will say, I'm not racist.
I'm not a racist. Why, some of my best friends are black.
Right.
Yeah, and then you say, name one. Or this one, I don't see color. And when some woman says to me, I don't see color, I say, I knew that. If you saw color, you wouldn't dye your hair that way. Or I say, if you saw color, you wouldn't wear that shirt with those pants. I believe that you don't see color. It's an attempt to deny skin color. And it's an attempt to deny what's wrong with seeing the color of my skin. Is it all right for you to see me kind of pink? That's okay for me. I don't mind. And I suspect that you don't mind being seen the color you are.
All right, we're dealing with Jen Elliott, who a long-term educator who started her campaign with after the assassination of Martin Luther King, with her historic brown eyes, blue eyes experiments, trying to point out to people who wouldn't necessarily experience segregation or racism or mistreatment or dehumanization, a way for them to see what it feels like to be on the other side of it. She continues to educate herself in her later years in life and bring out these points. You see, if you're white in this country, you are basically a racist. Now, that doesn't mean that every white person that's born is just simply evil. What it means is that we're born into a society of racism that is going to try to indoctrinate us in order to follow the path of racism and white superiority. Because the more people who believe the lies, the stronger the force is behind it. Now, you can have intervention. My mother was one of those interventions. She taught me that slavery was wrong, that how people were treated. She didn't go into as deep of what I understand today, but she gave me some things that people were just people, and there are people out there who hate people. And so she fractured that line of indoctrination to a point. But does that mean that I wasn't indoctrinated? No. I was indoctrinated repeatedly into our school systems and through people around me of things that I didn't really relate to racism. I was indoctrinated by the fact that this country was founded as a democracy or for freedom for others, and it wasn't. This country was founded strictly upon white superiority, racism. It was founded on the backs of slaves, making millions and millions of dollars. Today would have been billions of dollars if it was happening in today's numbers. And people who sat on their butts and didn't really do anything and had other people to do the labor for them became wealthy. And much of that wealth has been carried on to today. So we're still dealing with the benefits of slavery from those times. Some big corporations that benefited from slavery are still benefiting from it today. And they continue the indoctrination. Now, I couldn't help but be indoctrinated some, but my mother did break the trend to a point. And what she did with that was help me to be open to understanding other things. Now, I didn't have to go that way, but I chose that way. And in my early years, around 20 years old, I went from going to predominantly white churches to a predominantly black churches. And there were other reasons for it. I didn't go there because I was going to a black church and wanted to learn necessarily. I went there because I saw of the particular denomination I was in that this was the church that was growing. This is where I wanted to be. But what was to come was to further understand people. And I wanted to understand, and people I met, I wanted to ask them what their experiences was. And it has been a lifelong experience going from age 19 to I'm 60 now, learning all of the things that I've learned today. And I believe which is still just a fraction of what is really out here. But I believe, and I can see it now, how we are all indoctrinated. But we have, if we are willing to learn, we can break that indoctrination. Now, can I say that I am completely broken away from indoctrination? I would like to believe so. I think so. But this stuff is so deep that there may still be things that I have to break. And I have to continue to work on it. And that anybody who does that does not mean to put them down and look at them as a racist, because this stuff runs so thick and so deep. It has been planned for so long because so many evil people in the United States who formed this country to be a whites only country, to form it to be a white Christian nation, which is an oxymoron because you cannot have racism and God in the same room. You can't. If you're following God, you're going to the right. If you're following racism, you're going to the left. Now, you cannot go two different ways. Even if you have a split personality, which is what it takes to be a racist and a Christian, so to speak, your body will only go one way. Your mind, your physical mind will only go one way. You're either going to be a Christian or you're going to be a racist. Now, you could be a racist and you can claim God all you want to, but you're not with God if you're going the opposite way of God. Because there is no biblical proof unless you twist it out of shape like a car being wrecked in a car accident, all crumpled up. There is no way that you can follow God and follow racism at the same time. Now, we have many people in this country, many powerful people in this country. who continue to pursue racist agenda. But there are many people who simply stand by because it doesn't bother them so much. And they don't do anything about injustices they see. And many people simply ignore injustices. They simply don't want to acknowledge it. So let's look at another video, and then we'll talk some more.
You there, second desk at Blue Jacket. What is your name?
My name is Alexis.
Alexis, please leave my lecture room. I don't want to see you at one of my lectures ever again.
I don't understand.
I am not going to ask a second time. Thank you. Why are there laws? What are laws for? Anyone?
Social order?
To protect the person's personal rights. So that you can rely on the government?
Justice? Thank you. Tell me, was I unfair to your classmate just now? Indeed I was. So, why didn't any of you protest? Why didn't any of you try and stop me? Why didn't you want to prevent this injustice? You see, what you have just learnt, you wouldn't have understood in 1,000 hours of lectures unless you lived it. You didn't say anything because you weren't affected yourself. And this attitude speaks against you and against life. You think it doesn't concern you, so it's none of your business. Well, I'm here to say, if you don't help bring about justice, then one day you too may experience injustice, and there will be nobody there to stand before you. Truth and justice lives through us all, and we must fight for it. Because in life and work, I mean, we often live next to each other, but not with each other. We console ourselves that the problems of others are nothing to do with us, none of our business. And we go home glad at night that we're spared, but it's about standing up for each other. Every day an injustice happens in business, sport, or on the tram. Relying on someone else to take care of it is not good enough. It is our duty to be there for others, to speak up for others when they cannot. I am here to teach you the power of your voice. I want you to learn critical thinking to empower you to stand up for what is right, even if it means going against what everyone else is doing. Let's begin.
So I really like this video because this describes the world, but it really describes the United States. You see, the biggest powers of racism in this country are not necessarily the people who have plotted and planned to promote racism, who have organized and planned for schooling to be directed towards whites and denied by others, those who control financial markets and everything else. It is by probably a larger group of people who simply do nothing. Now, even within those people, there are variations of do nothing. Many of those also hold racist ideas. Well, actually, all of them, but my point is they hold racist ideas. They believe them because it's the easiest thing to believe. And so they don't take any action against it. If it's easy, they go along with it. If it goes along with what they've been told before, they go along with it. They make excuses for any type of injustice that happens. Or if an injustice happens, they might say, oh, that's different. That really doesn't happen that often anymore, but that is wrong. When in actuality, it probably happens every day in this country, or depending on the degree. But the amount of people who have been murdered by police, by others, is phenomenal. We hear about it more now because people are making recordings. People have social media to talk about it. But this stuff, while it has diminished to a small degree, has still been going on campaign in this country. The problem is that those who do nothing, while I would say are the vast majority, are Caucasian people who benefit from the system in this country in order to promote themselves, and they're not affected, and so they just do nothing. And so the system is empowered to continue on oppressing and doing harm to other people. Now, I've talked before, I don't believe that this country ever was designed to be any form of democracy at all. I believe that it was a facade, because there's so much evidence that the Senate was picked from legislators, that many states did not have the popular vote at all in the beginning. But the Constitution did have the ability to be changed. And so by push from people, changes did occur. So if they didn't push, it would not have occurred. Changes in this country have occurred throughout time because people put pressure on. The problem is that when people get something, too many people think we've got it, and so they back off. Where the people who want to oppress don't give up. They reorganize and go in a different route, a route that the people who were fighting back don't recognize. Some do, but the vast majority don't, and they did what they did and they're done now. So we struggle more and things begin to deteriorate, and the very things that they have accomplished begin to fall apart. Now, while the vast majority of this power is in the hands of African Americans, Caucasians, it is also a problem with non-whites, African Americans, other people. Why? Because while groups of people have been oppressed, they have been indoctrinated and convinced that there's nothing they can do, so why should they care about it? So even though they are being oppressed, there are some who just says, I can't do anything about it, and I give up. I won't vote, I won't do this, I won't do others. Now, I did say that the country was founded so it couldn't really be a democracy at all. Even if you elected your House of Representatives, you had the Senate to contend with. But there have been enough changes, even though there's still corruption, gerrymandering of things. If masses of people stood up and protested, stood up and went to the ballot box, there still is the power to turn things around. But people have been successfully brainwashed to many degrees, both Caucasians and African Americans and Latinos, who actually want to pose being white in many ways. They side more with white society, but they are under pressure just as well. Sometimes they don't want to believe it. But the thing is, we are all under oppression, even poor whites. But they don't want to think that way. Why? Because again, they've been indoctrinated. Because when it goes back in history to Europe and to the early stages of America, there were many white people who were indentured servants, people who were impoverished. And so there was a concern, and I said this was going to be the last video, but I'm going to play one that we already listened to again so we can hear that again to go along with this stuff, that if people could be convinced that they were better simply because they were white, they would side with white people, ignore the rich and powerful people who were hurting them as well, and be against black people. If they could say, by the mere fact that your skin color is white, although it's not white, it's a light shade of brown, but the mere fact you can believe that because of this fictitious skin color, white, that you are superior, then they will be on the side of the rich and powerful who deem to hurt them as well, which is exactly what's happening in this country right now. So I'm going to play one more video. Like I said two before, but I'm going to play this, and this comes from a previous episode, and we're going to re-emphasize that. So let's look at that together.
The whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, you know, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people, right? So ultimately the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. Fast forward to the Civil War era. And you have, I'm from the South, right? My people, the elite in my part of the country, right, actually announced that the reason they wanted to break away from the Union and possibly go to war with their brothers and sisters to the North was in order to maintain slavery and white supremacy. They said that at the time. We lie about it now. And we say it had nothing to do with that. But of course, at the time, they didn't have any shame about it, so they just said it openly. Right? The vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, said that the cornerstone of the new government was the great truth that the Negro was not the equal of the white man. So that's the reason the Confederacy was formed and existed. But here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war. Right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them, whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right? Rich folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs, and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that shit because he's sitting in the White House right now, right? Oh, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please, right? So that's been a long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But
So here you have it. This whole thing really has been about rich people being in power. And yet, how many people in this country are played for a fool every day? How many white people will vote for these rich and powerful people because of racism? A lot. That's why it stays in power. You see, they also use things they dangle in front of your face, like abortion. Now, I'm not pro-abortion. I believe in the sanctity of life, but I don't believe abortion is pro-life. I believe pro-life has to include everything after: education, healthcare, all these things, equal opportunities. All right? But when Roe versus Wade passed in 1970, 71, 72, something like that, it wasn't discussed by the evangelical movement in this country for several years, like till 1978. Why? They didn't care about it. In fact, they promoted pro-choice. But in the Baptist Convention, which is a big part of the evangelical movement, but they were trying to promote segregation and racism and trying to get people to vote on that. While they had a great deal of people, they didn't have enough as they used to take it over the edge. So not to say that so many people cared now, but there's enough people that became indifferent on that particular subject. There's still a vast amount of people who still vote that way, but there's an indifference. So now what do? We pull in this pro-life issue. Now they tried several different issues, but abortion was a big hot topic because they were convinced that they were following God in doing this, because leaders who were not following God, who claimed to be following God, told them that this was important. All a lie. So now they control your minds, but they still are a racist group of people. They still lead this country. This country was set up to be a white, loosely Christian nation. But all those people out there who may be tired of Christianity because you hear all this stuff, they are not Christians. Do not even consider them to be Christians who sit here and promote hate against people because of the color of their skin. Now, you may disagree with some people who do things outside in the world. Okay, God does too. But whatever your subject is, and racism is not what God would disapprove of, but remember that we should still treat them with human dignity, and people don't. When will we speak up? Because nothing will change as long as we're quiet. You just want to live a quiet life. Well, God did not want you to live a quiet life. You see, from the moment man sinned, we were to stand up against evil and follow God. Now, it's not that you won't have rewards in this world, but our true reward will be after we leave this life. If you sit here and ignore and let people go through pain because you don't want to be bothered, you've missed the entire point of being a Christian. You see, it's all about love. God loves us to reach down to us when we could not save ourselves because we made a mess of it. And he provided a path through the death of Jesus Christ to show that he ultimately loved us enough to sacrifice for us. We are supposed to become like him. We are not supposed to be celebrating the death of another human being because of the color of their skin. We are supposed to be reaching out to helping people. But as long as people sit here and go, it's not my problem, or it doesn't exist, or make up ridiculous notions like, I don't see color. Yes, you do. You just don't want to acknowledge it. I mean, how ridiculous do you say you don't see color? You mean you can't tell the difference between Bob and Fred? Fred is a Caucasian, Bob is is an African American. You can't tell they have different hair structure. Now, to look at them and see the difference does not mean that you look at one and see one's superior and one's inferior. But you recognize that there is a difference. What's wrong with that? Just like if you took two Caucasian men, and if they were twins, it's difficult to tell them apart. But actually, the spice of life comes when there are differences between people. And we can learn to appreciate somebody else can do something we can't. But then they can appreciate something we can do. That's part of being part of a whole puzzle, coming together. Same thing with a Caucasian person, African American person. These two individuals can become indeed great friends and appreciate each other for who they are. That's what God meant us to do. Oh, but it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because you don't want it to exist. But here's a little secret, folks. We've already said it, but I'm going to say it again. Those people up here do not care about you. President Trump does not care whether you live or die. He does not care if you have health care to take care of your family. He does not care if you have enough money to take care of your family or if you have a good job. Mike Johnson does not care about you. Mike Pence, maybe a little milder, same thing. He's part of this whole thing. All these people do not care about your welfare. They may go to church on a regular basis. They may say, praise God, but their actions show differently. All these Republicans who would deny Medicare and Medicaid that we've gone through these last several months, all these people do not care about you. Unless you're part of the rich and powerful, part of the elite, they do not care about you. Now, you may benefit to a point, but there are other people below you who don't benefit because they're a little less needed. But ultimately, they don't care about you. They care about you in only in the sense that you will back them up and you will ignore them and you will put your focus on these people who don't belong here, so to speak. Even though we don't belong here, because Native Americans were here first. We were not the first. We don't belong here. We are immigrants. And when we talk about Latino people, Mexican people coming over the border, let's be frank. Mexican people owned California and other areas before we did. We went and conquested them and kicked them out. We fought and killed to take that land. And now we're saying, you don't belong here. This is our land. How did it become our land? Because we were murderers and thieves and white supremacists. That's how it became our land. When will we start to grow up? We can't grow up without God. We can't grow up without getting away from this mess. And we can't grow up if we just sit there and ignore everybody else in the process. Until the next time on American Christian or Christian American.